Hi, everybody. It's Miss Jacobson again, and it's time for our second and third grade hour here at home with APS. I do want to give a shout out to the students, staff, and families of Mission Avenue Elementary School here in Albuquerque. You know, their principal, Mrs. Frances Garcia, had sent us this picture of her and her dog Zoe reading Yertle the Turtle at home. And Zoe looks very intent on this book right now. We also want to shout out to the kids who are involved in the Engineering the Future Practices program that they have at Mission Avenue. Mission is a school that's doing a lot with science and math and technology, and they have a STEM lab there at Mission that they've been putting together. A lot of wonderful things happening with the help of a teacher there named Ms. Chevalier, and we want to say thank you to all of them for their hard work, and I hope you guys at Mission are doing really well. We've got a big show for you for the rest of this afternoon. Second and third grade is coming up, and then we will have a fourth and fifth grade hour after that. So hold on to your hats, get your paper pencils ready, and it's time for another segment of At Home with APS.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of At Home with APS. I'm Mrs. K, and I'm going to be joined today by three other wonderful teachers, Miss Kathy, Miss Kraft, and Miss Lori. We've worked together to put together an ELA lesson, or an English Language Arts lesson for you all. This lesson is geared for second and third graders, but students and adults of all ages are welcome. Whoever you are, wherever you're watching from, we're really excited that you're here with us today. So let's get started. Last week, you'll remember we focused on inventors and inventions. This week, we have a similar theme, but we've adjusted our essential question, or the question that's going to guide our thinking. Behind me, we have a new essential question. What value does technology bring to people's lives? Wow, that's a complicated question. This week, we're going to unpack that question. We're going to read 3 different nonfiction stories about real inventors who use technology to make people's lives better or easier. Some of it's old technology, some of it's newer technology. I'm excited for you to see it. But before we can dive into those stories, we have to do a little bit of word work to get our brains ready to listen to these nonfiction pieces. We're going to start today with our word of the day with Mrs. K. Now, I have to warn you, this week we're going to make this piece a little bit more challenging because I know you're smart and I know you're hard workers and you're ready for the challenge. So let's get after it. Okay, last week, Miss Kathy showed us that when we're looking at multisyllabic words, or words with more than one syllable, we want to look for smaller words or sounds that we recognize. Do you know we do the same thing when we hear new words? So today, I'm not going to show you the word of the day right away. I'm going to say it. And I want you to listen for another word, a smaller word, within this word that's going to help you figure out the meaning. Are you ready? Our word of the day is accidental. Accidental. Yeah, some of you probably heard the word accident in accidental. Because we know what the word accident means, it can help us think about the meaning for the word accidental. Okay. Now, you know me. In order for me to remember a new word, I have to say it 3 or 5 times. So while I hang this up, we're all going to say accidental together in our deepest voices. You ready? Accidental, accidental, accidental. Oh, those were very deep voices. Well done. Let me put this up on our board. Oh, maybe. Oh, maybe I'll do it this way. That works pretty well. Okay. So we have a clue about what accidental means because we recognize the word accident hidden inside that, right? An accident is something that's maybe a mistake or something you didn't plan on happening. Let's look at the meaning of accidental from the dictionary. You can read it with me. Something that happens unexpectedly. Oh, so I take that to mean that this is something that wasn't planned. I didn't mean for it to happen. It's not necessarily something bad. I just didn't plan for it to happen. It's accidental. Can you think of something that you've done before that's accidental? Let's keep thinking about that today. Okay, now that we have our word of the day and we know its meaning, we're going to move over to our Frayer model. If you were here with us last week, you saw how we made our own vocabulary journals. We took a full sheet of paper, folded it in half, and made this visual, the same one that's up there. Now, I made a lot of them. I made 6 or 7 pages of these so that I'm ready each day for a new word of the day. If you have that, go ahead and pull it out. If you haven't made it yet, don't worry about it. Go ahead and start by just making that shape on a piece of paper, and you can finish up your vocabulary journal later on, after the show's over. Okay, let's go. Now, if you remember, I told you that I know you're up for a challenge. You're ready for things to get a little more difficult. So we're going to use this model, the same model we used before, but we're going to add in a little piece that'll really stretch your brain. Now, if you remember this Frayer model, this is a graphic organizer or a visual way to show what we know. We're going to use this to show what we know about our word of the day, accidental. So help me remember, what goes in the middle here? Our word of the day, exactly. What's our word of the day? Accidental. I'm going to write it in the middle while you write it in the middle. I'm going to try to use my very best handwriting. Awesome. Now, we're going to start in the upper left-hand corner. Do you remember what goes up there? Exactly, it's our definition of the word. Let's read it together again. Something that happens unexpectedly. Whew, unexpectedly, that's a big word. I'm going to have to really loosen up to write that. I'm going to write it while you write it. This time, I want you to make sure you leave a little bit of space at the bottom. I'll tell you why in a second. Let me use a resource to make sure I'm spelling it right. Then I can check my spelling. Awesome. Kiss your brain. You are so smart and hard-working boys and girls. Okay, now remember, we don't have to fill in these boxes in any specific order. I know I've been doing the synonym second, but I must skip ahead to the part where we write our own creative sentence using our word of the day. So if you're sitting by yourself, I want you to think of a creative sentence that uses the word accidental and just say it out loud. If you're sitting next to somebody, you can say your new creative sentence to that person. Go ahead and say it while I think of mine. I bet you came up with some really creative sentences. Are you ready to hear mine? Okay. My sentence is, The scientist made an accidental discovery. The scientist made an accidental discovery. I'm going to write my creative sentence in my box while you write yours in your box. Okay, are you ready? Here comes the new part. We're going to use some of what Miss Kraft taught us last Friday. If you remember, last Friday, Miss Kraft talked about different parts of speech. She used two very important words, adverb and adjective. She taught us that an adverb describes a verb and an adjective describes a noun. I want us to try to figure out if accidental is an adverb or an adjective. How are we going to do that? Let's use the sentences we just made. Okay, I'm going to use mine. The scientist made an accidental discovery. Accidental is my mystery word. I need to figure out what accidental describes. Was the scientist accidental? No. Was the discovery accidental? The scientist made an accidental discovery. So the discovery is what accidental describes. Okay, I'm halfway there. I know accidental describes discovery. Now, is discovery a noun or a verb? In this sentence, it's a noun. The discovery is something that the scientist made. So we know that adjectives describe nouns, which means accidental is an adjective. Exactly. I'm going to write that word adjective under my definition so that I remember. You do the same thing. I wrote it in a different color so that it stood out, but you can just write it in a pencil. Now I want to make sure that we have enough time for our other teachers. So I'm going to give you a mission to do these next two boxes on your own. Remember, this box is where we write our synonyms, or words that have similar meanings. And this box is where you're going to draw a picture that illustrates your sentence. Ooh, so I'm going to get to draw a picture of a scientist making an accidental discovery. Up next, we have word work with Miss Kathy, and then a really great book with Miss Kraft. I have one last mission for you. Can you listen for the word accidental in our next sections? I bet you can find it. Thanks for working with me today.
Hello, readers and writers, and welcome to Word Work with Miss Kathy. I'm so happy to be your teacher again today. Today is Monday, and remember, friends, on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, we meet here for English Language Arts, which is learning some really important skills to help us with reading and writing to become strong learners. Okay, so today we're going to be doing word work, and if you'll remember from Friday, we created labels for our home, for our environment around us, to label the technology we see. Now, these labels that are all around our environment now are going to make us stronger readers and writers because we see words that are really long, multi-syllabic words all the time. And you can also use these words when you're writing. You have the correct spelling that will help you as well. Over here, I have our words that we used on Friday. We found that technology was an invention around our homes, around where we are, because we are watching it right now. We also identified the refrigerator as being another important invention that we can identify. We said batteries are an important invention, the microwave, an automobile, which we know is also called a car, and computers. So when we labeled our inventions around our home, around wherever we are, we only labeled 6 of them. So I have a challenge I want to give you today, which is to show you a few more important inventions that you can label around you. Now this is important because some of these words have sounds in them that we're going to be talking more about today. So the first invention that I think is really important, I'm going to hold up the word. I want you to take a moment and see if you can read it. Remember, when we see big multisyllabic words, we look for familiar parts that will help us read them. So I see in this word C-A-M, and I can sound that out using letter sounds. K, A, M, cam. And then I see E-R. And I know when I see E-R together, they make So I see camera, an A at the end. Remember, our vowels can have different sounds. We can have soft vowel sounds. We can have short vowel sounds and long vowel sounds. And in this case, it's making an A sound, which is a little unusual, but not when it's at the end of the word. So we have camera. Friends, when we're labeling a camera around our home, we cut out a small piece of paper and we drew a little picture of it. That helps us when we're labeling our environment. And then we're going to go attach it to a camera. Now, I find camera to be a little bit of a difficult invention to label because the camera I personally use the most is connected to a phone, my telephone. So if I were to label the camera I use the most, I would also be labeling something else. Can you read that second word for me? That's right. This one is telephone. And I see a tricky sound in the middle I'd like to talk to you about. So the first thing I see is tele, and I'm going to fold that over. And then I see PH, which makes F, and I see O-N-E, telephone. I have the word telephone up here. So if I were to label my camera, I would also be labeling my telephone for this particular invention. So I'm going to go ahead and set those down because that leads me to my next word, which has that tricky PH in there again. Our PH makes our F sound. Photo, and there's PH again. So photograph, our camera on our telephones will take a photograph. That is 3 inventions all in one small item. Wow, friends. I wonder if you can think of any more inventions that are hiding in a telephone. But the last word I'm going to show you today, I want you to go ahead and try and read. And this one is a little tricky. I do see a word hiding in there. It's at the very end, the last 4 letters. I see a word that I've seen before. It's a short word. I see city. I'm going to cover up city. And I see another word that you may have seen before, especially at the beginning of the year, if you studied government with your teachers. I see elect. Electricity. Sometimes when we're looking at our words, looking for something that we at least have seen before, really helps us when we are trying to read a new word. Electricity. So my device here, my telephone, which takes photographs using the camera, needs electricity in order to function. So those were 4 really hard multisyllabic words that I'm going to add to my list of inventions that I can label around where I am. So I want you to think about other inventions that are around you and start labeling them. It's okay to ask a sibling or a grown-up for help labeling some of these inventions that are really challenging to spell. And when we challenge ourselves with those new words, that's a good thing. Challenge is definitely when you feel your brain struggling a little bit and you know that you're definitely learning, which I hope we struggled with a little bit today. So last week we were really working hard on our inventions. We're identifying them, writing down some really tricky words, and learning how to read them by thinking what makes sense when I'm learning a new word. Today, we're going to be looking one step further, which is some of those tricky sounds, and we're going to be creating something. We're going to make our own inventions for how to become pros at them. But before I do that, I wanted to go back to our really cool essential question for the week that Miss Kay just shared with us. When we were doing our word of the day with Miss Kay, she also showed us our essential question. What value does technology bring to people's lives? And here we have all of these inventions. All of these inventions, I wonder if you think an invention is technology. Are all of these inventions we've been learning about together examples of technology? Yes, absolutely they are, friends. And so when we're learning more about our technology and how it makes our lives better, what value it brings to us, I want you to think about the ones we have up here. Television today is bringing me into your home so we can learn together. That is immense value. Also, television can play some of my favorite movies, which I greatly value. A refrigerator, what value does that bring to your life? How can a refrigerator make your life better? What value does it bring? In my case, it means if I made dinner last night, I can put some extra in the fridge to have for lunch today. That's pretty fantastic. I don't have to waste food. So I wonder if you can think about batteries. Friends, what value does a battery bring to your life? Take a moment to think about that. Go ahead and tell somebody if they're sitting next to you while you're watching this, what value does a battery bring to your life? For me, I'm thinking about that electricity in my device again. I'm really glad my device has a battery that I can charge so I don't have to be plugged into the wall all day. So as you label the environment around you, as you think about inventions, also think about our question this week. How does this make my life better? What value does it bring me? And I think that really helps when we're feeling kind of sad to think what value do the things around me bring and what can I be grateful for? So I really like our question of the week this week. All right, friends, now time for inventing something. So normally in a classroom, your environment isn't just labeled so you know how to spell different words around you, and you have a word wall and all of these great tools around you. You also have something called sound cards that you probably practice with your teacher. So today, we're going to make our own sound cards because the tools you have in a classroom, you can sometimes make at home to make you a stronger reader and writer. So I'm going to need a big piece of paper, just a regular sized piece of paper, but I haven't cut it up yet. You're going to need some scissors. And remember, over here we say, whenever you're going to use scissors, ask a grown-up to make sure it's okay first. And you're also going to need a pencil, and if you have it, markers or crayons would be really helpful today too. So I'm going to get everything I need ready to go. While I get my materials ready, will you go ahead and grab yours? Scissors, pencil, and a few pieces of paper. All right, friends, are you ready? So I have already made some of my materials that are ready to go. As you can see, I've got some pieces of paper that I've cut up. And we're going to start there. We're going to make our materials. So I have my full-size sheet of paper. And I want you to go ahead and fold it in half very carefully, just like we do when we're doing our Frayer's model and you're making your own vocabulary journal. And really pinch it to make a nice crease. Because what I want you to do after you've folded it hamburger style, so top to bottom, I want you to open it back up, and we're going to use our scissors, and we are going to cut along that line, that crease that we just made. Go ahead and do that, friends. Okay, so this is where you have a choice. I kind of like these half-size pieces of paper. They're nice and large. But you can, if you have only a couple pieces of paper, you're running low on paper, you can fold these again to make them smaller to save some paper. That's a good way to use your resources wisely. Ooh, that's hard to say. That was almost an accidental word. And I'm going to go ahead and chop that piece of paper in half. Okay, so you could make your pieces larger or smaller depending on what you have access to. And what you want is a nice little stack of paper. It can be colorful paper, it can be white paper. I chose colorful so you can see it a little bit better at home. Now, normally I would do this in pencil first because I make mistakes. Sometimes I write something accidentally that I did not mean to, and an eraser is very helpful with that. But so you can see it nice and big, I'm going to use a black marker. So we were looking at our words, and we had a couple words with a tricky sound in them. We had the word photograph and the word telephone. And I'm going to underline two letters that are sometimes tricky for learners. Two letters that make one sound. When I say PH, I don't say P. I don't sound out the individual letters. That's called a digraph, friend. They're two letters that make one sound together. So PH is actually going to be kind of like the sound from the letter F. Go ahead and try making that sound. Okay, so we're making a sound card to help us remember the sounds of those two letters together. I'm going to write the letters P and H. Do you know what? I wish I had not done that in capital letters. That was an accident. I'm going to redo that. Lowercase p, lowercase h. Because when we see P and H together, usually it's not a capital P and a lowercase h. Often it's a lowercase p and a lowercase h. So here's what my sound card looks like so far. I have P and H together, and I want to draw something now that reminds me of the sound those two letters make together. So I can think of a lot of words that have P and H in them. I'm going to use our invention from today, photograph, because it has it in there twice, and I'm going to draw a picture of a photograph. Have you ever done that before? So a photograph is an image taken by a camera, such as the one on my phone, or a camera that's all by itself, which sometimes fancy photographers use. So I'm going to draw that picture. I'm going to start with a rectangle. Usually a photograph, when it's in your hands, like a photograph from your birthday from a long time ago where everyone's around you and you're blowing out candles, it would be a rectangle that you hold in your hands. So my rectangle, and I'm going to draw a picture of something that makes me happy, something that I have seen photographs of. And I'm going to draw that picture of a birthday. And I'm going to draw a cake with candles and a picture of a young girl. This girl's going to be me. When I was 3 years old, I've seen this picture at my parents' house. And I was so happy because I was about to blow out my candles at my birthday. And my little cake is right there on the table. And there's me with my hair. So PH, and then the sound for this card is kind of like an F. So today we made one sound card. Next time you see me on Wednesday when we're working on our word work in English language arts, we're going to make more sound cards and we're going to build up a collection because what we want is a bunch of cards that help us learn tricky sounds and we're going to add to them every day and review them. So thank you for hanging out with Miss Kathy today for word work. Thank you for labeling everything in your house because that's going to make you a stronger reader and writer. Up next, we have a beautiful story. You might hear the word accidental in there with Miss Kraft. Bye, friends.
2, 1.
Welcome back, friends. Thanks for joining me today. I'm Mrs. Kraft, and we're going to read a story today about Band-Aids. However,
We read some stories last week, and remember we talked about that idea of inventions. And where do ideas for inventions come from? And this week, we're moving into more of the technology behind those inventions. So what value does that have for our lives? And I know we think of that word technology to mean maybe the computers that you use or the television like you learned with Miss Kathy. But technology has another definition, and it can actually be, how do we apply that scientific knowledge to things that we need? And you're going to find out that that happens in a very true story that I want to read to you today called The Boo-Boos That Changed the World. Again, this is a nonfiction story. So when I read this to you, it's going to sound like fiction, but it's really a true story. These events happened. These people really existed. And this person, Mr. Earl, actually created the Band-Aid. All right, so you can see from my cover, it's called The Boo-Boos That Changed the World, a true story about an accidental invention. Really? Remember those words, accidental, invention, the best kind of inventions, right? This book was written by Barry Wittenstein, and it's illustrated by Chris Sue. The publisher of our story, and I'm going to put my reading glasses on today, is Charles Bridge. All right, let's get started with our story. Once upon a time, in 1917, actually, a cotton buyer named Earl Dickinson married his beloved Josephine, and they lived happily ever after. The end. Actually, that was just the beginning. The newlyweds expected to live a quiet life in New Brunswick, New Jersey. Instead, Earl and Josephine ended up changing the world one boo-boo at a time. You see, Josephine was accident-prone. She often bumped and bruised herself while working around the house. But that was nothing compared to how often she injured herself in the kitchen. You can see the illustrator does beautiful pictures in this story. Ouch! When she sliced and diced an onion, she sometimes sliced her finger too. Boo-hoo! When she grated cheese, she sometimes grated her knuckle. Ah! When she lifted a hot pot off the stove, she sometimes burned her hand. After Josephine winced in pain, she quickly grabbed a rag to stop the bleeding. But with bulky towels between her fingers, it was even harder for Josephine to hold a knife. She became even more accident-prone. Impossible, you say? It's true. Josephine's klutziness had become a bloody problem. Every night when Earl came home from work, he looked forward to talking with Josephine and eating the wonderful meal she had prepared. That was until he saw his beloved wife's hands. Yikes! Her cuts might get infected. He had to help his new bride. Earl's father was a doctor, so Earl knew a little bit about boo-boos and bandages. And luckily, he worked for a company that manufactured hospital supplies. Earl knew there had to be a solution, but what was it? Here's a picture of poor Earl and poor Josephine trying to solve their problem. Earl thought why he shaved. Maybe if. Earl thought why he bought cotton in the afternoon. Then I could. And Earl thought some more while he lay in bed at night. And that would solve. Finally, a light bulb went off over his head. I've got it! Earl yelled with excitement, waking up Josephine. "What have you got?" she said. "The bloody solution, of course." Right? The light bulb went off in his head. The next morning, Earl tried out his idea. Step 1. He took a long piece of adhesive tape and laid it on the kitchen table, sticky side up. Step 2. Earl cut small squares of sterile gauze and stuck them every few inches onto his sticky tape. Step 3. He placed a material called crinoline on top of the adhesive tape to keep the strip sterile. "It's perfect," said Earl proudly. Now all Josephine had to do was cut off a piece of the long strip when she hurt herself. She didn't need anybody's help. She only needed one hand. It worked. At last, they lived happily ever after. The end. But wait, here comes the part about how Earl and Josephine changed the world. Earl guessed there were probably hundreds, possibly even thousands, of people who could benefit from his new invention. Earl and Josephine thought about making the bandages themselves, but they soon realized it was a big job. Earl told one of his coworkers about it, and the coworker encouraged Earl to meet with the company's president. At first, Earl's boss, James Johnson, wasn't quite sure Earl's idea was good enough. Earl demonstrated how easy it was to put on the bandage. Then Mr. Johnson saw his own light bulb. The company agreed to produce and sell the product. They combined the words bandage and first aid to create the clever name Band-Aid. Look at what I have here. The Band-Aid. Now Earl and Josephine would surely live happily ever after because Band-Aids were guaranteed to be an instant success. And with that, we have come to the end. Thank you and good night. Oops, not yet, sorry. That first year, Band-Aids were made in a factory. It was a slower than slow process, and only a small number could be manufactured by hand. They came rolled up and were 18 ridiculous inches long. They came and 3 ridiculous inches wide, and they still had to be cut into pieces. Earl, Josephine, and Mr. Johnson had high expectations, but the Band-Aid boxes collected dust, ignored and unwanted. Uh-oh. What do you think is going to happen now? Do you think they're just going to give up? Think about it. They've tried to create, and it didn't quite work. And now they've tried something new, and they're not sure it's going to work because an 18-inch bandage is pretty long. Let's see what happens next. A few years later, the company invented a machine that could mass produce thousands of the bandages. Instead of the user having to cut them, each one was ready to go. Band-Aids were now about 3 inches long and 1 inch wide. And they were cute too. Each one had a little red string to pull in order to open the wrapper. Success! Band-Aids flew off the shelves. The end. Not really. Unfortunately, even with the cute red string and the convenient size, the public wasn't sold on the idea. Mr. Johnson knew there had to be a solution. What happened next was truly a stroke of genius. The company decided to give the Band-Aids away. Mr. Johnson wondered who needed a self-adhesive bandage. And then the light bulb went off again. The Boy Scouts, of course. All those fall down, climb up, scratched elbows, scraped knee boys got plenty of cuts. It didn't take long before the mothers of those rough and tumble boys saw how handy the little bandages were. And we have some pictures of Boy Scouts. If any of you are in the Boy Scouts, we have them woodworking and angling, fishing, bugling, pioneering, doing archery, ornithology, which means studying birds, and geology, which is studying rocks. They're busy boys. That did it. Earl and Josephine's invention was a smash. During World War II, the company sent millions of free Band-Aids to the brave soldiers fighting overseas. In the years that followed, Band-Aids were made in different sizes, colors, and designs. Some even had pictures of cartoon characters on them. And that continues to this very day. From boisterous hot dog vendors in Brooklyn, fancy French winemakers, tired taxi drivers in Denmark, and English bobbies on bicycles, to daredevil skateboarders in Saskatchewan, king crab fishermen in Alaska, sweaty Ugandan soccer players, and applauding audiences at the Bolshoi Theater in Moscow. The sounds of "Ahya! Wah! Ouch!" echo still, but not for long. Because those snivels and sobs of pain are silenced by Earl and Josephine's accidental boo-boo invention. And that is the happiest invention of all. The end. Really the end this time. So boys and girls, you can see that this author had an interesting way of writing their story, didn't they? They had some surprises in there. And even though it was nonfiction, which means this is a true story, they told it like it was a story, a true fiction story, right? When they added the end and they gave us some surprises. So nonfiction, sometimes we think, oh no, that's kind of boring and dry. It doesn't have to be, right? Because there are some amazing things in here, and it's really interesting. I want to read you a little bit about the notes from the author. So the Band-Aid is one of those inventions that we don't really think about. Have you thought about Band-Aids? You might get one when you go to the doctor. Maybe a grown-up keeps a box of them for you to use, right? But they're just there. They've always been there our whole lives. But there's a whole lot involved. Every invention has a history. Things don't invent themselves, do they? Then who does? And when? And where and how? Inventions are invented because they fill a need. The Band-Aid helped Josephine feel better. But think how many people have used Band-Aids. So many. Such was the case of the Band-Aid. Josephine needed an easy way to stop the bleeding on her fingers and to make sure her cuts didn't get infected. So Earl combined several ideas that resulted in the invention of the Band-Aid. But was he successful the first time? No, he wasn't. Just like many of our other stories last week. We create an invention, and we have to keep going on it, right? We have to revise it and test it and see if it will work. And you can't give up. That's one of the greatest things you can learn is don't give up. This seems like a simple idea today, right? But it's not. Things came together perfectly for Earl, right? His father was a doctor, so he had some information that way. Earl worked for a cotton company, so he had the cotton to make the pad on the Band-Aid. And he was able to get the supplies. And his wife was accident prone. If you take any of those pieces out of this picture, the Band-Aid may not have happened. So you can see that sometimes the inventions are happy accidents, right? That's our word, accidental. So we can accidentally develop something. So I want you to think, as I end my time here with you today, about some happy accidents that you have, and maybe you have an idea for an invention. Go ahead and write that down or draw a picture of it, and we can share that when you come back to school. All right, friends, thank you so much, and have a wonderful time. Miss Lori's going to be up next to talk to you about some writing, some really fun writing she wants to do today.
2, 1, on.
Hi, welcome back, friends. Today we are going to be working on writing with Miss Lori, and I want to say thank you to Miss Kraft for reading that wonderful book to us. I never did know how bandages came about. You know, it's something that you just kind of take for granted because they've been around your whole life. So today we're going to start with some poetry, but before we do that, I want to go back and think about what we learned last week. So last week, Miss Kraft showed us how to write an opinion piece and how to write a descriptive piece of writing. And I just want us to think about what she talked about during the descriptive writing piece about adjectives and adverbs, and how an adjective describes a noun, so like a person, place, or thing, and how an adjective, an adverb describes a verb or the action. Because we're going to need to think about that when we are writing our poetry this week. So before we get started with that, the writing piece, I want to kind of give you a little bit of the history of the type of poetry that we're going to do. I love poetry, and I love to read it. I love to write it, even though I don't think I'm very good at writing it, but I love to try and write it, and that's what we're going to try and do this week, is write some fun poetry. So the type of poetry that we're going to write today is called a cinquain poem. And this type of poetry was invented or developed by a person named, I always say her name wrong, Adeline Crapsey. And she was an American poet, and she invented this about 100 years ago. This type of poetry was invented. And people really liked this type of poetry, and it became very popular because it's simple. It's pretty simple to do. And it is similar to some other forms of poetry that maybe you've done at school, like a haiku or a diamante poem. So that's what we're going to do today. So cinquains, I have a chart up here so that we can kind of go through this together. So how to write a cinquain poem. Cinquains are 5 lines long. So that's important to know when we start to design our poem. They have 2 syllables, they have 2 syllables in the first line of the poem, 4 syllables in the second line of the poem, 6 syllables in the third line, 8 syllables in the fourth line, and then we're back to 2 syllables in the fifth line. Okay, did anybody catch that pattern? Because there is a counting pattern to this. Let me move this down so we can see it more clearly. So if we look at the counting pattern in this type of poetry, it goes 2, 4, 6, 8, and then back to 2. So we skip counting by 2s. 2, 4, 6, 8, and then back to 2 syllables. Then the third rule of a cinquain poem Let me move this back up to where we can all see it better. Is syncanes do not need to rhyme, but you can include rhyming if you want to. So that's what I love about this type of poetry, because you can choose if you want it to rhyme. Some people really like to write rhyming poems, and then other people don't like to have things rhyme. So it's really your choice. You get to choose whether it rhymes or it doesn't rhyme. So that's it. 3 simple rules. Okay, let's look back at the first rule. They are 5 lines long, and then they follow the syllable pattern. Boy, I'm having a hard time talking today. They follow the syllable pattern of 2, 4, 6, 8, and then back to 2, and they can rhyme or they can not rhyme. So that is your choice. So just like any kind of writing, when we're getting ready to start, we need to think about how we're going to plan them out. So you need to think about, what do you want to write about? So we've been talking about inventions and innovations over the last couple weeks. Today we talked about accidental. We've talked about our other vocabulary words. So you can use any of those as an idea, or you can come up with something totally different if you want to write about that. So you can write about something you like. You can write about something you don't like. You can write about something that you see around you, like the inventions that Miss Kathy talked about. You could write a syncane poem about your refrigerator if you wanted to. You can write them about things that have happened to you. So maybe you did something really fun over the weekend, like you played in the backyard with your brothers and sisters. So you could write about that. So you can brainstorm your ideas and think about that. Now, I'm going to talk to you, I'm going to show you an example today of a syncane poem. And then we're going to rethink about exactly how that goes. And then when we come together again on Wednesday, we're going to talk about how to use syncane poems to tell a story. Okay? So here is my example. Because anyone that knows me and all my students from past years when I was in the classroom know I have a tremendous love for ice cream. So I wrote my syncane poem about ice cream. So this is my example. The title is Ice Cream. Ice cream, cold and yummy. I love its sweet richness as it finds its way into my tummy. So now we will go over next time on Wednesday how to count out syllables to make sure that our syllables match what the requirements for a syncane poem are, and then we will review exactly what it takes to make a syncane poem. I would like you to try and write one today and have it ready for us to look at on Wednesday. So that is our writing portion for today, but I want to remind everybody exactly what we focused on during our lesson today. So first, with Miss Kay, we learned the word accidental, and we thought about how accidents sometimes make inventions. Then we learned about how to solve hard words with Miss Kathy, and she took us on our tour of different inventions around our house and how to use our word strategies to decode those hard words. Then we heard an amazing story about how the Band-Aid was invented. And I hope that you think about other things around your house and maybe wonder, how was that invented? Then today, our writing, we started learning about what a syncane poem was and what it was going to take to write. And we will explore that more in depth on Wednesday when we come back together. So it has been our pleasure to work with you all today. I hope you had some fun and you learned some new things. Thank you for joining us today for At Home with APS.